friends, welcome to the 2021 Rally, where we are ready to celebrate. The Charleston Area Justice Ministry is composed of many congregations who in turn represent different traditions. Each of our congregations believes something different about the nature of God, the name of God, about what God wants for us to do. But each of us shares a commitment to pursuing justice in God's name, to finding in the things that we share the strength that unity can bring. As we bring our gathering in prayer, we invite a member of CAJM to offer words of prayer from the stream of their own faith tradition, recognizing that this may be different from our own. We vow to respect each other for the things we share and for the ways that we are different. Friends, let the rally begin.
Good evening, friends. My name is Jeremy Rutledge, and I'm senior pastor at the Circular Congregational Church. And I send warm wishes from our congregation to yours. And I offer this brief reflection as we begin our time together, thinking about where we've come from and where we're going. In Toni Morrison's American masterpiece, Beloved, she tells of a sermon delivered in a clearing in the forest. There, a character named Baby Suggs preaches a good word to people who are weary and heavy laden. Baby Suggs invites the people to sing and to dance, to laugh and to cry. More than anything, she invites them to be free in ways they cannot be in the world outside, with its oppressive forces of racism, cruelty, and human enslavement. Yet in the clearing, just for a moment, the people make the world they want. In the clearing, just for a moment, they are liberated. According to Morrison, the preacher's good word was not to go and sin no more. It was not to be blessed, or to be meek, or to be pure. No, the preacher's good word was that the only grace they could have was the grace they could imagine. If they could not see it, they could not have it. I've often thought of our Charleston Area Justice Ministry as a metaphorical clearing in the forest. For here we gather weary and heavy laden from the work of justice, from the world of COVID, and from centuries of ingrained and entrenched patterns of racism and oppression. Yet when we are together, just for a moment, we are making the world we want. Our Charleston Area Justice Ministry is a lived expression of the grace we can imagine. It is what we most need, found when we gather together, joined by love and common cause. So when I look around at our gatherings, I see not only my dear Christian family, but my dear Jewish and Muslim family. I see not only my family from Charleston, but my family from North Charleston and West Ashley, Somerville, and Mount Pleasant. I see my family of every race and ethnicity, every age and ability, every gender expression, sexual orientation, and life experience, all of us gathered together in a beautiful expression of beloved community as we work for the well-being of all. The only grace we can have is the grace we can imagine. If we cannot see it, we cannot have it. Friends, in our Charleston Area Justice Ministry, we can see it. Just think of all the ways we have seen it this year. When the pandemic began, we may have expected to see this justice ministry flag or falter. Most of our congregations met remotely. We were busy trying to translate our services online, check in with our members, and simply make sense of the time we were living through. Yet what we saw was an incredibly strong year. People jumped in to our justice ministry. Members were engaged. Beloved new congregations became involved. Financial giving was unexpectedly generous. And many of you logged on to meetings like I did and simply marveled at all the beautiful faces you saw. Page after page of friends from every neighborhood wishing each other well during this time and still joining together to get to work. Of course, we have also seen existing inequalities amplified during this crisis. Many do not have what they need to get past the digital divide and connect safely online. Many are suffering the loss of jobs and income. Many have been left behind by a transportation system that isn't there for everybody, or a healthcare system that leaves hundreds of thousands in our state without insurance or access to care. Racial disparities persist in every area of our common life, including COVID mortality rates and access to vaccines. After all these years of working for justice together, this year we have felt anew the fresh pain of injustice during a time of pandemic. It has all shown us that we need each other now more than ever. The status quo isn't going to fix itself. The world outside our little clearing in the forest can't really imagine anything different, but we can. As we gather together, we can see something else. In Toni Morrison's words, it is a vision of grace. In our words, it is a vision of beloved community. It is a vision of the way we know things can be, because together we have already broken down barriers and made of ourselves a community that includes and values and respects all people and is willing to work for a more just world for all. It is in that spirit that we gather, and it is in that spirit that we invite others to join us. For we know that to realize our vision will take the power of all our people, the power of all our financial resources, and the power of all our imagination, because the place we are going is not the place we are now. Friends, we have learned so much this year. Yet what we have learned, more than anything, is that we need each other. To paraphrase Toni Morrison, the only world we can have is the world we imagine together. Amen.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Pope Singleton, a member of Charity Missionary Baptist Church. Think about the last time you were sick enough to go to the doctor. Was it easy for you to make an appointment that didn't conflict with your work schedule? Did you have to worry about how you were going to pay for the visit? Or how you were going to get to the doctor's office? Or if you could find someone to watch your kids? Could you find a provider you trusted or who looks like you and understands your cultural experiences? Over the past few months, our research has shown us that most people in the Tri-County struggle to get good health care because of three huge barriers. The first barrier is cost. In the Tri-County area, over 100,000 people don't have any kind of insurance. And in Charleston, where more than half of the people without insurance are Black or Hispanic or Latinx, it's clear that our healthcare system has not escaped Charleston's violent and shameful legacy of systemic racism. And even for those who are insured, getting to the doctor is often still so expensive because of high copays and deductibles. The second barrier is access. Even when people do choose to pinch pennies and seek out care, they are met with more barriers still, like doctor's offices and clinics that close at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., conflicting with most regular work hours. Our limited locations that are hard to get to without a car, or no one to watch their kids during their appointment. The third barrier is trust. For people who aren't white, who want to see a provider who look like them and understands their experience, their choice of providers is limited at best. And for people who aren't native English speakers and want to see a provider with translation services, there are few options. We live in a community where it's easier to get sick than stay healthy, where our healthcare system profits from people being sick instead of being well, where people pay the price of being poor with their lives, where forces outside of our control deem who is worthy of healthcare and who is not. Enough is enough. It's been time for change. It's time for our community leaders to step up and take action.
Good evening. I am Rolanda Donald, a member of Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church, a single mom, and a public elementary school teacher. Much of my life has been a series of impossible choices, especially when it comes to healthcare. I've dealt with doctors who didn't understand my experiences. And tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of how my barriers to appropriate healthcare left me with a major health issue. After graduating college, I had to deal with the new reality that I could no longer benefit from my father's insurance. So when I began my career in education, I was excited to have a stable income for myself and my newborn son, and I acquired health insurance. I felt accomplished. I was adulting. Finally, I could be proactive and see primary care doctor to address that diagnosis of prediabetes I was given while pregnant with my son. Well, those feelings of accomplishment left soon as I realized that the insurance I had acquired was too expensive for me to use. I couldn't afford to make the co-payments and deductibles for the appointments when the monthly cost of daycare for my son was already competing with the cost of my rent. So I continued on with life until the need for urgent care arrived. Fast forward 5 years later, and I'm expecting my second child. Did you know being pregnant qualifies you for Medicaid, even if you work and have insurance? Now I could check in on those other health issues that I had neglected because I couldn't afford the well checkups. Unfortunately, I would discover such neglect had forced my pre-diabetes into full-blown diabetes. Even now, I vividly remember driving home from a routine prenatal appointment and getting a call before arriving home. The woman on the other end of the line told me to turn around and get right back to the doctor's office. I drove back to the doctor's office in fear. There, I learned that my numbers were so high that I could have been in a coma. This news turned my pregnancy into a high-risk one. Now, it was especially important for me to find a doctor who I could trust. But I didn't have many options because they had to accept Medicaid, specialize in high-risk pregnancies, and be within walking distance since my car had stopped working. So I ended up stuck working with a doctor I didn't trust, who didn't have my best interest in mind, as she prescribed me meds that ended up affecting the birth of my child that she tried to encourage me to abort. I had to fight to advocate for myself every step of the way. It was exhausting to say the least as I walked back and forth to each appointment up until the day of delivery. After I gave birth to my second child and lost Medicaid because it only covered up to 12 months postnatal, I struggled to regulate my diabetes. Test strips, checkups, and insulin were more than I could afford. I ended up in the ER a few times, seriously sick because my blood sugar levels were either too high or too low. If I had been able to afford regular checkups after my first pregnancy, it's likely that I would have never even progressed to stage of diabetes. Had I been closer to the appropriate doctors for my high-risk pregnancy, I would not have suffered complications giving birth and endured an extended 6-day stay in the hospital before bringing my daughter home. But now I have to fight every day to manage my diagnosis simply because I couldn't afford what was available to me through my insurance. And even with the assistance of Medicaid, I couldn't get to the right doctor. And still, I can't afford the kind of treatment that I really need. Every day, I make impossible choices. Should I pay my rent on time or get a 1-month prescription that's over $300? Should I buy test strips so I can avoid the ER or buy groceries for my kids? Should I pay to go to get a physical or make my car payment? When there's limited access to care, the only choice you have is to make the impossible choices, settling for whatever is available to you. Our community can do better.
Hello, my name is Paul Carswell, and I'm a steering committee member here on the Healthcare Committee with CAJM, and I represent Grace City Church. At the Nehemiah Action, we'll be asking for more mobile health units operated by the Fetter Healthcare Network in the Charleston area. You may be asking, what's a mobile health unit? Mobile health units, or mobile clinics, are essentially doctor's offices on wheels. With some added benefits, they can provide any number of services that you'd get in a regular doctor's office. Things like vaccines, primary care, labs, behavioral health care, and more. And more services are able to adapt their services to meet the community's needs. So first, why mobile health clinics? And why Fetter? Because investing in mobile clinics will address these 3 barriers we found in our research. We want Fetter to run them because they are already out in the community operating mobile health units. They just need more to reach the thousands of people who still can't access care. Let's review how they'll address the first barrier: cost. Fetter's mobile units serve folks with Medicare and Medicaid and people who are uninsured or underinsured. They provide primary care, medical homes, behavioral health services, vaccines, and more. They offer services on a sliding scale so that anyone can afford them. Now the second barrier: access. By bringing care directly to the communities who need it, most mobile units reach people who traditionally don't have time, resources, or energy to get to the doctor. Research proves that this works through the changes seen in the communities served by mobile health units. Life expectancies go up and emergency room visits go down. And finally, the third barrier: trust. Mobile clinics are proven to build trust with communities of color and other medically underserved people because they bring care directly to the doorstep. The Fetter Healthcare Network has already worked hard to build that kind of trust with the people that they serve, and with more mobile units, they'll be able to build more relationships and provide more care. We will be asking for funding for these additional mobile units from MUSC. Our steering committee is working hard to nail down a specific target and dollar amount. Why MUSC? Because they are a public hospital and therefore receive some state funding. Their mission is to serve anyone, regardless of their ability to pay, and what we've learned is that the mobile health units are a more effective way when backed by local health systems. We do want to acknowledge that there are thousands of healthcare professionals in the Charleston area who have worked tirelessly over the past year, putting their lives at risk every day to serve our community in the midst of an unprecedented global health crisis. We are so grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you. And at the same time, the COVID-19 pandemic has shed light on what uninsured people have always known about the healthcare system, what underinsured people have always known about the healthcare system, what poor folks have always known, what Black and brown folks have always known. That's nearly impossible to access solid medical care in the Charleston area if you are not white or wealthy. The good news is that our community has the opportunity to do something about this problem that will help both our community in the midst of the pandemic and get more people to the life-saving care that they need for years to come. We hope that MUSC will lean into this opportunity.
Good evening. My name is Carlette Geddes, and I am a member of Edisto Presbyterian Church. We started our housing work in 2017 when many of you here tonight voted to address the lack of affordable housing in Charleston at our Community Problems Assembly. Back then, we led the nation in evictions. Rental costs had skyrocketed and showed no sign of slowing down. Our own people told stories about living in squalor, cramming too many family members into small houses, and moving in with their parents after losing their jobs. We've been in a housing crisis for years. The factors that led us to the crisis are not accidental. Through a combination of public policy, corporate interests, greed, and complete disregard for people who have a right to the land, we find our city leading the nation in evictions. We find the peninsula 2/3 white while once 2/3 black. We find most of our income spent towards housing with barely anything left. We find our kids changing schools multiple times in a year in search of a place their families can afford, leaving friends and beloved teachers to have to start somewhere new again and again. We are told in Scripture that God hears the cries of the afflicted, that when the righteous cry for help, the Lord answers and delivers them from their troubles. For 4 years, we've raised our collective cries for relief from high cost of housing, and I believe God answered. We have had our solution for 4 years. But we've also had people in positions of power that have refused to act for 4 years. So our cries must continue. We must raise our voices so our officials are awakened from their slumber of inaction. We must raise our voices so our officials are shaken from their seats of comfort and privilege. We must raise our voices so our officials feel the rumble of the righteous, refusing to sit patiently and quietly while housing crisis claims life, liberty, and happiness from us and our loved ones. So raise your voices now. Let's hear that rumble. When I say, what's our call? You say, housing for all. What's our call? What's our call?
Hi everybody, my name is Ann Birdseye. I'm a member of Circular Congregational Church and of CAJM's Housing Steering Committee. I'm here to share the story of a dear friend. She would be here herself, but at this stage she is afraid of retribution from the managers of her housing situation. She says, like many people, I've had trouble with housing for years in Charleston, but for the sake of brevity, I'll start around 2014. Back then, I was forced to move into a place I could barely afford. I was 65 and it was getting harder and harder to live. I was spending most of my income on rent, which kept getting raised each year. Many times, I only made it because my mother, who was in her 90s, was helping me a lot. But by 2018, the writing was on the wall. There was just no way I could afford to live where I was living. So I started looking. I put in an application to 62 Broad Street, but apparently I made just a little too much money. So I made too much, but not enough. And either way, I couldn't afford to live. I also applied at Canterbury House and to the Ansonborough House. They required 6 months of my bank statements and all sorts of paperwork, but they just never had an opening. Every single month I checked. And they always had waiting lists. This went on for months. All the while, I had a couple of jobs and also a couple of under-the-table gigs just to get by. By 2019, I was getting desperate to find a place to live when I heard about a place called Williams Terrace, a low-income senior living apartment complex run by the Charleston Housing Authority. I put in an application to the Housing Authority, and it took me 2 months to get in. Even though it's low income, my rent still took half of the money I had to my name each month. Around the time I moved in, I realized that we have a bed bug problem here. I mentioned the bed bugs to one neighbor, and pretty soon multiple neighbors had reported the problem to management before I could. Then I got a notice that said I was not allowed to use the laundry and not to enter anybody else's apartments. I waited 2 weeks for the pest company to treat the apartment, and it still didn't work. I went through the process again, and I finally, through my own efforts, hopefully gotten rid of them. Speaking of eviction, if you're just a day late on rent, even if your check is in the mail but just delayed, you get an eviction notice, even during a deadly pandemic, in a complex filled with some of the most at-risk people. If management could get eviction notices in our doors, they would. So you learn to keep your mouth shut about things like bed bugs. You become wary of the authorities. After all, they're not called the housing authority for nothing. My own family is afraid to let me in their homes because they're afraid I'll bring bed bugs from the place I'm spending most of my time and income on rent to live. I don't share with my neighbors as much as I used to, and I try to take care of my things on my own. I'll end with this. Right after I moved in, one of my neighbors passed away and decayed in her apartment. The terrible stench of death was all over the place. In this case, it wasn't the housing authority's fault, but these are the options in Charleston. To even scrape by, you settle for bed bugs, isolation, threats of eviction, and literal decaying bodies. This is what it's like in our community. I've worked all my life, and in my age of retirement, this is what I face: indignity after indignity. Still, I know I'm one of the lucky ones. Hundreds of people of Charleston have stories like mine. Hundreds more don't have a roof over their heads or never had the help of a parent. So many of us are on our own, denied access to basic necessities and dignities, and the older you get, the more vulnerable you get to authority. It's shameful that in a community where some people have so much, so many more of us are left to desperately cling to survival. People get chewed up and spit out in this community, and we treat it like it's normal, like there's no other option. But it isn't normal, and we are compelled to take action to make sure the injustices of today are not carried to tomorrow.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudette Hart. I'm a team leader at Morris Brown AME Church. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Housing Steering Committee. In CAJM, we've been pushing for the same housing ask for almost 4 years, and this year is no different. We want an affordable housing trust fund with a dedicated, reoccurring source of funding. We need over 2,600 affordable units per year for the next 10 years to even keep up with the growth in this area. Less than 10% of that is being achieved, but a housing trust fund will help us to get there. Housing trust funds are sources of public revenue dedicated by law to a distinct fund with the express purpose of producing and preserving affordable housing. These funds are proven with over 780 existing across the country, generating billions of dollars for affordable housing. They are flexible, they are effective, and they help more families and individuals have a safe roof over their heads. Our housing story is one of perseverance. Some might think of the quote, "If at first you don't succeed, try, and try again." I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm done trying. I'd like to stick with Yoda. Do or do not. There is no try, Charleston County Council tried to punt this housing trust fund one too many times, and now the ball is in their hands. It's past time for our officials to do the work necessary to address our housing crisis. We have a new makeup on Charleston County Council and a potentially fresh start. We want Charleston County to take the initiative finally and establish this housing trust fund with $8 million from their large rainy day fund. We want them to prove to us that housing is truly a priority and that you can shepherd public funding to lead public good. What's our call? Housing for all.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Byron Benton, pastor of Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church. I hope to walk in the shoes of those who have come before me as champions of justice. Any measure of success I have achieved in life is a direct reflection of their contributions. Thus, I'm passionate about the work we do through CAJM because I have personally witnessed the painful and debilitating impact many in my family and community are experiencing because of an inefficient healthcare system. We must collectively give voice to those whose cries of despair remain unheard. For that reason, this year, I will be leading the negotiations for healthcare.
My name is Julia Eichelberger, and I'm a member of First Scots Presbyterian Church. I've been involved in CAJM for 8 years, doing research and serving as a backup negotiator for education issues. This year, I've been honored to serve on the steering committee for healthcare. So many of you are concerned about this issue and have worked hard, thoughtfully, and with determination. And now we've chosen a solution that will make a real difference. We need to lift up this cause and make all our community's voices heard. I'm excited to be backing up Reverend Benton in our healthcare negotiations.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Charles Hayward, and I am the pastor of the Eddystone Presbyterian Church. Let's have a shout out for Eddystone and all of our visitors. I've had the privilege of serving Charleston Youth Justice Ministry as organizing treasurer, co-president, secretary, and vice president. And my ministry has always been about building communities one neighborhood at a time. I'm also a member of the housing committee this year, and I will be leading negotiations along with Dr. Claire Curtis as my backup.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Claire Curtis, and I'm a member of Kahol Kadosh Beth Elohim. I joined CAJM in the first year and became particularly interested in the work CAJM did when Rabbi Alexander talked about how solution-oriented CAJM was. And not only solution-oriented, but solution-oriented with a method for achieving real results. One of the things I'm most proud of in our work with CAJM is our organization's tenacity. We do not go down easily, do we? Which is why I am back on this stage supporting Reverend Hayward for our housing negotiations.
We held over 115 house meetings this year, and in almost every house meeting, someone talked about how difficult their lives were because of high healthcare costs. We just heard from our committee that if you are black or brown in our community, that you get sicker and you die quicker because of many in our community not having primary care providers and have to put off care because they are uninsured, unable to pay co-pays, can't get to the doctor because of transportation, childcare, or other problems.
Imagine struggling with high healthcare costs on top of high housing costs. While housing rates have skyrocketed in our community, the number of officials with the guts to act on this devastating problem and create public policy that serves and saves families has plummeted. Charleston County Council cried scarcity when the pandemic arrived and they refused to fund the Housing Trust Fund and instead put it before you, the voters, with no plan. We're here tonight having written the plan ourselves to prepare for the negotiation on March 22nd so that we can walk away with commitments for $8 to $10 million to fund the Housing Trust Fund from rainy day funds. When it comes to housing, our rainy days have been too many to count.
As we work together on March 22nd to gain commitments for mobile health units and for affordable housing, we must remember that these asks we are putting before our officials will literally save lives in our community. We must also remember that CAJM is never intended to be a voice for the voiceless. Our mission is to build power so that those directly impacted by the problem can finally have a seat at the table to be heard, to have the power necessary to address the problems that have plagued and tormented us for too long. For a long time, decisions have been made for us. When we negotiate with our public officials at our Nehemiah Action, the point is to have those impacted by these injustices present in the room to help shape the decisions that impact us.
When March 22nd comes, we must remember that our public officials engage in tough negotiations all the time behind closed doors. The Nehemiah Actions open those doors to the entire community. And when we start asking, we'll ask for what we need, knowing that public officials have the power to grant us those needs. We'll be looking for a yes. We'll be clarifying for the community whether we're getting a yes. Everybody will understand what is being committed to.
Our history displays decades of decisions that padded the pockets of some at the expense of our larger community. The Nehemiah Action is where we come together to drown out the voices of meism and instead fill our officials' ears with the voices of community. So on March 22nd, we will not just accept a no. We will work to understand what things are flexible to negotiate on and what are not. As I negotiate this year at the Nehemiah Action, I will need your support. I need you to be silent as you listen carefully for what is said. Sometimes it may seem like we got a yes, but that may not be the case. There will be a leader on stage that night to help you all know when it's time to applaud and honk your horns after a yes, and when it's time to be silent after a no. Following a no, please do not honk, do not share emojis on your screen, or type in the chat. There is power in your silence. It may be uncomfortable to hold it at times, but I need you to risk being uncomfortable for a few moments so we can address the fear, despair, and helplessness that many feel because they are dependent upon healthcare and housing that they cannot afford. Can you do that?
Remember to ensure that everyone you're inviting really understands their important role in supporting the negotiators. Make sure they understand that we must all join in silent solidarity when things get tense. There will be no surprises. All of our officials will have received questions in advance. They will be informed of the evening's format. Remember too that the format for the action is similar to the format for many county council meetings and board meetings of all kind. At county council meetings, when a vote is cast, members get to say yes or no. It is our meeting, so we will control the microphone and we will set the limits to follow our carefully planned agenda. After they are asked a question, our officials will respond with a yes or no and have 30 seconds to explain. If they say no, then we will begin the process of clarifying and negotiating to get a yes. Will you remember to tell everyone you invite about these ground rules?
I hope you feel me with the significance this opportunity gives us for change. Every year, we carry the weight of unjust history on stage with us. Generations of intentional wrong and the complicity of silent leaders and also the silence of congregations and the faith community have led us to what we are doing this year's actions. We've been silent about the problems for too long. Tonight, let us embrace the power of our collective prophetic voices and leave here motivated to build a community where justice and equality prevail. March 22nd, let us gather at the bend and with our three, bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice.
Justice, equality, relationships, diversity, power building, and steadfastness. All these things point to the purpose, the pursuits, and the vision of the Charleston Area Justice Ministry. And it's a great vision because it is a sacred vision. If you hold sacred the Hebrew Bible, you find justice there. If you hold sacred the words of Jesus of Nazareth, you find justice there. If you hold sacred the words of the Quran, you find justice there. If you hold sacred the Dharma teachings of the Buddha, you will find a call for justice there, because our vision is a sacred vision. Not only is our vision a sacred vision and a holy vision, but it is also a humanitarian vision, because its ultimate pursuit is the dignity and justice for all people. Better public transportation for all people, affordable housing for all people, better learning environments for all people, access to health care for all people, and the dignity and justice affirmed in and for all people. But the sacredness of our vision and its humanitarian nature are not enough. The vision of CAJM only becomes a reality if it becomes our vision. It has to be Brian Henderson's vision first. It has to be Cecilia Armstrong's vision. It has to be the vision of Betsy and Hank Martin. It has to be the vision of Wendy Hudson. It has to be the vision of Kenneth Robinson. It has to be the vision of Andy White. If it's not our individual vision, if we do not find in ourselves a call for justice and to do justice, if justice is not a part of the individual vision for what we want in our lives, then the vision of CAJM will never come to pass, because the vision of one CAJM depends on the vision of each of us. In our strategic plan, CAJM has a vision for 7,000 people at the 2030 Nehemiah Action. Can you imagine that? 7,000 people standing and looking at our elected officials in the eye and asking them and encouraging them to think of everyone as they make their decisions. But unless that is not the vision of each one of us, it'll never come to pass. Unless I have a vision to bring me plus 3, unless Catherine Singleton has a vision to follow up with her network members, and unless Rolanda has a vision and a determination to reach out to as many people as possible, it's not going to happen, because the vision for 7,000 begins with the vision for one. In our strategic plan, we also state that we want to be self-funded for at least 80% of all that we need, because we believe that God's justice must be done by God's people. And if we don't own justice, then those who fund it will try to own it. But that only becomes a reality if it is the vision also of Circular Congregation and Pastor Rutledge. If it's not Pastor Will and Grace City Church's vision to put their dollars connecting with their gospel, if it's not my personal vision to fund justice more and better than I fund Starbucks, then the vision for CAJM's 80% self-funding will not come to pass. Our strategic plan also calls for us to be a diverse group and to have more people engaged in the work, including businesses and organizations. But that does not happen if we don't have individual visions to reach out to our dry cleaners and to reach out to the companies that take care of our lawn care, to reach out to our dentists and encourage them to participate in making this community better. Our strategic vision also calls for us to spread the gamut, to be more diverse in the congregations that we have. But that vision will never come to pass unless we don't make a commitment to not only invite our cousins and our uncles and our aunts to the Nehemiah Action, but ask them if they are willing to set up meetings with our organizers and their pastors so that their pastors and their churches can see what CAJM is doing. The only way that the vision for CAJM comes to pass is that that vision becomes our individual vision, so that we're not only coming to the events, but outside of those events, we're participating in the work of engaging and calling and being people of justice instead of just doing justice stuff. So the question is not what is CAJM's vision. It's already been outlined, prayed over, and established. The question is, what's your vision? Who will you be?
Thank you, Pastor Brian, for helping us set our sights on what's possible. And thanks again to all of you for coming out tonight. It's always powerful to see the CAJM community gathered together and feels especially so during this moment in time. If we were together in a large space, now would be the time that I would call you to gather with your congregations to caucus. While this caucus time feels chaotic in person, we always appreciate the energy and excitement in the room as we take this time to check in with one another on how close we are to our Nehemiah action goals. Since we cannot be together to caucus, it is very important that each of you take the time to follow the instructions I am about to give you in order for you to be counted tonight and for us to get a sense of how close we are to our goal of turning out 2,300 people to the Nehemiah action. Since our text to vote process didn't go as planned this past fall, we have a new process we're going to try. Let me remind you that I believe it was Henry Ford who said, "Anyone who keeps learning stays young." Here's your chance. My first instructions are for those of you who have a smartphone with an accessible camera. First, turn your camera on, and here in a few minutes, a QR code will appear on the screen. What is a QR code, you ask? It's a machine-readable code consisting of an array of black and white squares. When that comes up on the screen, I want you to point your camera at it and let your camera focus. If you let your camera focus on that black and white image, you should receive a pop-up on your screen taking you to a survey. Just tap that when it comes up, and then the survey will come up on your phone. Then please fill it out. You can use the voice command on iPhones and Androids by holding down your home button and saying, "Scan QR code." When you see the link pop up, tap it and fill out the survey. You can use your device for multiple people in your car or household. You just need to submit one survey per person and then go back and do the whole process again. In just a few minutes, that QR code will appear on the screen. If for some reason you have a smartphone but your camera does not work, you can use your phone to type in the web address for the caucus survey. That web address will also appear on the screen shortly. For those of you without a smartphone, a phone number will also appear on the following screen for you to call. That number is 843-300-1899. It will route you to one of our volunteers taking down your information. The information you all enter includes your name, congregation, email, who your team leader is, and whether or not you are a network member. If you are joining us tonight and have not yet committed to being a network member, we ask you to become an official member of CAJM. You'll be given a chance to do so through that survey link. Along with sharing your network member status, you will be also asked to list the names of those that you have confirmed to attend the March 22nd Nehemiah action. Please only list the names of those you have confirmed. We want to get a head count after tonight of how many we have committed to attending our March 22nd action. And finally, you'll be asked to share what your investment will be in CAJM this year, and we ask you to share any businesses you own or business owners you know that share the same values as CAJM. We have many business partners in our community that support CAJM's work, and we would love to add some more. I hope you all have your phones out because now is the time to share your caucus answers.
laissais le temps et jouais de la vie, comme on joue de l'amour, et je vivais la nuit, sans compter sur mes jours.
When the late Maya Angelou was asked in the 1990 Paris Review why she reads the Bible, she said, for melody, for context. Also, I'm working on trying to be a Christian, and that's serious business. It's like trying to be a good Jew, a good Muslim, a good Buddhist, a good Shintoist, a good Zoroastrian, a good friend, a good lover, a good mother, a good buddy. It's serious business. It's not something that you think, oh, I've got it done. I did it all day. Hot diggity. The truth is, all day long you try to do it. You try to be it. Maya Angelou understood that being a good person of faith requires work. It requires being honest with yourself, trying hard to get better, living your faith and breathing your faith. In CAJM, we understand that no matter what faith tradition we embrace, we are called to do justice. Showing mercy and grace to our neighbors is a fundamental part of our faith traditions, but so is doing the often harder work of justice. Not every person, not every congregation decides to do the serious business of justice work, but we are committed to doing that. And all of you have committed to do that, and you keep making that decision again and again. Day after week after year, you do the work of the serious business of justice, and CAJM continues to grow. Let us remember what it means to say that CAJM is growing. We don't want to grow simply for the sake of growing. We want to grow in size and numbers because we battle daily against oppressive systems. We battle against white supremacy and an economic system where the market decides who succeeds and who suffers. We have to cope with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. We have to deal with an often unjust criminal justice system, public schools that are often still separate and unequal, unaffordable housing, and expensive and sometimes inaccessible health care. We need the power of people of faith to change this for the better. By growing a powerful justice ministry, joining together and saying enough is enough, we come one step closer to creating a more just world and giving life to the words of James Weldon Johnson. Let us march on till victory is won. We are delighted and thankful to announce that some new congregations have decided to officially join in this work, in the covenant with CAJM. This means that they have committed to, number one, building a justice ministry in their congregations, number two, participating in the 3 annual processes, number 3, accepting responsibility for the financial health of the organization by contributing annually and by supporting CAJM fundraising efforts. Number 4, voicing the concerns of their congregation members, doing assemblies and supporting the organization's agreed upon goals. And number 5, selecting a leader to serve on the CAJM Board of Directors. Let us welcome our newest partners and celebrate our growing justice ministry.
That's me. That's me. And that's 3 people. And I'm going to help them.
There's a movie that came out in 2000 called Pay It Forward. In the movie, a boy named Trevor comes up with an idea to change the world for the better. He creates a charitable plan based on the networking of good deeds. He called his project Pay It Forward. The premise behind Trevor's project was to do 3 big favors for someone that needs help or assistance with a problem they could not fix on their own. The recipients of that favor were then asked not to pay back the favor to the person who assisted them, but extend a favor to 3 other people who needed help. As I reflect on the message of Pay It Forward, I believe our God-ordained work of partnering together through this Charleston Justice Ministry is about helping people with big problems that they cannot fix on their own. We are here today at this rally because our collective faith demands it. Our core values and belief systems embody it. And we are charged with changing the world for the better. In other words, we must pay it forward. How do we change the world for the better? How do we pay it forward, you ask? Every organization that is here today partnering with CAJM have team members that are here this evening. We have pledged to support the Nehemiah Action. Now it is our duty to get every team member to get 3 other people to the Nehemiah Action. We then jam-pack our Nehemiah Forum with concerned citizens because there is power in numbers. Each person also represents voting power at the polls. Elected officials are hired and fired by the vote. The vote is mightier than the sword. But in order for these elected and appointed officials to respect our concerns and work with us, we have to show them that we don't mind showing up for a righteous cause. So bring 3 people to the Nehemiah Action. And just like we plan to show up for the Nehemiah Action, we also plan to make them accountable. So bring 3 people. When they fail to do their job that they've been elected to do, we will show up to make sure that they get fired if they do not do their jobs as civil servants of the people of this community. So bring 3 people with you. So in this moment, how do we change the world for the better? We show up by bringing our 3 people. Beloved, here we are at this sacred time and appointed hour. How do we pay it forward? We show up with our 3 people. We show up and let the powers that be know that their lack of concern, compassion, nor empathy for the marginalized, the disenfranchised families of North Charleston will no longer be tolerated. And this consortium of concerned citizens is partnering together to hold our elected and appointed officials accountable. We are here to remind them that they are charged with making our communities better. We will ensure that they know that we know that our systems are supposed to support their constituents, are supposed to work fairly for everyone and not merely for the rich and the have-ease. These systems tend not to work for our poor and marginalized Black and brown communities. Dr. King said it this way: whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. So bring 3 people with you so that we can show up together. Let me close by sharing this personal story. I took my daughter Candace with me on a lunch meeting when she was around 3 years old. And when we sat down at the table, it was too high for Candace. I looked at Candace, and Candace gave me that look like, "What you talking about, Willis? Daddy, you know this is not going to work." So then I proceeded to ask the waitress if I could get a booster seat for Candace. While we waited for the waitress, Candace climbed up into my lap. When the waitress returned, she brought the booster seat. I then placed Candace into the booster seat and strapped her in. You see, the booster seat gave Candace the lift she needed to reach the table. Everything was good in her world. She was able to play with her crayon and her coloring sheet. What are you trying to say, Pastor Brantley? I'm simply suggesting to us, beloved, is when things are out of reach for persons struggling without hope and they feel helpless to do anything about it, God will send us, people like you and me, to act as booster seats to lift others up and assist them when the resources that they need are out of reach. Because regardless of age, ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, rich or poor, everybody deserves a seat at the table where they can all enjoy life and the pursuit of happiness. Let's be like those booster seats. Lift people up who feel broken by this pandemic. Let's be like those booster seats. Let's pick somebody up so that they can have access to affordable health care for their families. Let's lift somebody up. Let's be like those booster seats. Lift somebody up so they can have access to humane and affordable housing. Let's be like those booster seats. So let's change the world for the better. Let's be like those booster seats. Let's pay it forward in the lives of others. Let's change the world In order for us to pay it forward, beloved, we must show up. Show up, and we will watch the tyranny of unjust policies fail. Just show up and witness a healthcare system adjust to the needs of its people. Just show up and watch the transfer of power manifest to the oppressed. Show up, and when we show up, God will meet us and show out.
Beats. beats.com.